Well, since 2000, 25 years ago, Australia's population has grown by 43%, weekly increases of up to 13,000 people. More than half of this growth has stemmed from net overseas migration, with natural increase often linked to births by migrants accounting for the rest. It has been runaway inflation, and there's been a lot of negative feedback from that. Over 12,000 Australians, including notable figures such as Dick Smith, economist Leith Van Onselen and Emeritus Professor Ian Lowe, signed a position statement on sustainable population. Joining me now is Leith Van Onselen, Chief Economist and Co-founder of Macro Business. Leith, good morning to you.
Yeah, g'day, Graeme. How are you?
Yeah, look, well, thanks. We know overall your views on population growth. How would you assess what is planned happening in South Australia, or in particular in Adelaide, growing from about 1.8 to 2.3 million in the next 20 or so years?
Yeah, well, actually, Adelaide's population is currently about 1.5 million, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. But basically, if Adelaide's going to grow by 700,000 people over the next 30 years, you're going to need a lot of houses. You're going to need a lot of infrastructure. You're going to need additional water supplies. So obviously we've seen the Adelaide Hills and Mount Barker struggling for water at the moment. You're going to need more energy as well. So these are all the sort of nuts and bolts issues that come with extreme population growth. And, you know, as your previous caller said, Adelaide has not built enough infrastructure to keep up with the population growth over the last decade or so. And what is the guarantee that you're going to build enough infrastructure as your population grows by 700,000 over the next 30 years? So these are all costs of immigration that never get factored into the equation by politicians.
Yeah, well, the headline is, 61,000 new homes. That's all well and good because we are struggling, as is the rest of Australia. There is a housing crisis. Sounds well and good, but as you say, what about the infrastructure? Yeah,
infrastructure, water, energy, houses, all those sorts of things. The fact of the matter is that the federal government is going to continue pumping in hundreds of thousands of new people into Australia every year, so additional renters, additional people that need housing. You're going to need a hell of a lot of housing, you're going to need a hell of a lot of infrastructure, you're going to need more water supply somehow, which means more desalination because we don't have enough rainfall, and you're going to need more energy infrastructure, and all those things are incredibly expensive, and the costs of those end up being borne by residents.
Australia's population at the moment is around 27 million. What is the balance figure? What do you think we can sustain with a lifestyle that we can expect or have expected in the past?
Well, so Australia's population is currently 27.5 million people. It's grown by about 8.5 million people this century alone, which is just extraordinary growth. And it's actually forecast to grow by another 13 million people in the next 38 years. So that's like adding another Sydney, Melbourne and a Brisbane to Australia's population in just 38 years. So, look, I personally think the federal government should slow net overseas migration to about 120,000 a year, which is kind of what we had, before the mid-2000s when the Howard government initially ramped it up. And we should try and sort of stabilise the population under 35 million people, and not allowed to grow by more than that. Because at the moment we're basically headed towards 40.5 million in the next 38 years, and then probably to 50, and then who knows where from there. And the fact of the matter is our living standards are not improving from this policy; they're actually getting worse.
We don't need to go back too many years to the fact that so many unfilled jobs. We couldn't get labourers, we couldn't get builders, we couldn't get miners. And so they opened the floodgates. This was obviously not the right thing to do in your mind.
No, it's not. Well, I mean, Australia's population has grown by 8.5 million people this century, and the reason for opening the floodgates in the first place was labour shortages. But we've added 8.5 million people, and we've got more labour shortages than ever, and all that tells you is that it doesn't work. Because you can try and solve one problem by importing a whole bunch of migrants, but then that creates other problems. So, for example, at the moment, there's a big push to import a whole bunch of migrants to work as builders for houses. But if you do that, you're then going to need more nurses, you're going to need more school teachers, you're going to need all these other things to basically service those people you've just brought in. And then that creates shortages in other areas. And then the solution then is to import those people. And then you end up back at square one, needing more builders. This is basically the policy Australia has had for 25 years of running this extreme immigration. We've grown the population by 8.5 million people, and we've got worse skills shortages than ever, which just tells you that it does not work.
We have a lot of people reacting to what we've been talking about this morning, the Premier's plan for 61,000 new homes and the population growth, et cetera, et cetera. People feel pretty powerless. What can they do effectively?
Well, I think the number one thing they can do is lobby their politicians that we've had enough of this stuff. Right, we've had enough of this endless population growth that's been foisted upon us, which most Australian voters do not support. And it's time for them to start lobbying their politicians, state, local, everybody, to basically tell them that we've had enough. But ultimately, the federal government sets immigration policy. So we need the pressure to rise upwards. So you need to lobby your state politicians to then lobby the federal government to stop doing this, because Australia is basically in managed decline. So we're effectively, trying to grow the population through endless population growth while per capita living standards have been declining. And we're actually becoming poorer per person, and our living standards are being eroded. And that needs to stop.
It's got a feel of the old pyramid system.
It is. It's an absolute Ponzi scheme. So, one of the reasons why we've been running this high immigration policy is to so-called stop an aging population. But it doesn't work, because migrants also grow old. And the funny thing about it is most of the old people in Australia now came during the post-war migration boom, or during the baby boom. So that just tells you that if we import a whole bunch of people now to try and solve the ageing problem, in 30 years' time we're going to have a bigger problem, because the people we've imported have gotten old, and then we'll have to repeat the whole Ponzi scheme all over again.
Ah, dear. Yeah, questions upon questions. Leith, thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Graeme. Anytime.
Leith Van Onselen, Chief Economist and co-founder of Macro Business. What are your thoughts, folks?